Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com, and this is anti-war news for Thursday, October 6th, 2022. First story at the top of antiwar.com today. U.S. intelligence believes that Ukraine killed Daria Dugina. So this came out on Wednesday in a report from the New York Times, and it said that U.S. intelligence agencies believe that parts of the Ukrainian government were behind the slaying of Daria Dugina. And she was the daughter of the prominent Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin. So Dugina, she was a political scientist and journalist, was killed by a car bomb outside of Moscow back in August while driving a car owned by her father, who is suspected to have been the target of the attack, but she was the one that was killed. The New York Times report said that U.S. officials admonished Ukrainian officials over the killing. And of course, it said that the U.S. didn't take part in the assassination. The U.S. officials said that they feared Ukraine's covert operations inside Russia could escalate the war in Ukraine into a wider conflict. But ultimately, Dugina's killing, it didn't change Washington's policy, as the report said that the U.S. concerns had not prompted any known changes in the provision of intelligence, military, and diplomatic support to the Zelensky government or to Ukraine's security services. So it's saying that they were upset about it and they said something to Ukraine, but they didn't really actually do anything about it. So when this first happened, Russia blamed Ukraine's intelligence services, and they named two Ukrainian suspects. And for their part, the Ukrainian government, their official line is that they did not have any role in the murder of Dugina. And a Ukrainian presidential advisor reiterated that position in comments to the New York Times. And just some interesting facts about Dugina, and she was on this Ukrainian website known as Meyer Vortis. If I said that right, I might not have, but I linked to it here, and it's known as this Ukrainian kill list. It's this strange website. I mean, if you're watching on the video, you see what it shows in the top here, and it basically designates enemies of Russia, and there's thousands. Enemies of Ukraine, and there's thousands of people on this list, including prominent Westerners. Roger Waters was just put on there. But it had a picture of Dugina, listed as an enemy of Ukraine. And since she was killed, there's red lettering across her picture that says liquidated in Ukrainian. So, and also after she was killed, Pope Francis commented on it, and he described her as an innocent victim of the war. He said, quote, "I think of that poor girl blown up by a bomb under the seat of her car in Moscow. Innocents pay the price of war," end quote. So the way Ukraine reacted to that, I think, says a lot. It drew a rebuke from Ukraine's envoy to the Vatican. And it's very rare that you'll see an envoy, a country's diplomat to the Vatican, criticizing the Pope. And he went on Twitter and said, and really, denounced his comments. And then Ukraine's foreign minister said similar things, and said that Ukraine's heart is torn by the Pope's words and that it was unfair what he said. So it shows how they view her, that she wasn't a victim of the war. She is a supporter. She supported the war in her role in Russian media, and like her father. And Dugin, I don't know too much about Dugin, but in the West, they try to portray, they call him Putin's brain, but he's very nationalist. He's written a lot about multipolarity. He wants Russia to be a bigger power and have more influence. He supports the war. He thinks Putin should have gone harder, should have done it earlier. But he's been very critical of Putin, and I don't think he really has much influence over him, unlike the way he's portrayed in by the U.S. and what other Western media. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty big. I mean, the story here is that the U.S. intelligence officials are saying this, and why did they tell the New York Times? I mean, there's a few possible reasons. It could be that they're trying to kind of separate themselves from the incident, and that maybe some of them are actually not happy with the Zelensky government, and that's why they're doing it, or they're just trying to throw Zelensky under the bus for it. Uh, we don't know exactly, but it's definitely interesting. Okay, so the next story here, Putin signed laws on Wednesday formalizing the absorption of 4 Ukrainian territories. So it's been formalized, the annexation, and this came because he signed a decree for it last week. And then Russia's two houses of parliament ratified these treaties, and then he signed it into law. So now Russia considers the territories that it controls in Ukraine as Russian territory. They consider it to be part of Russia. And that includes the oblasts of Kherson and Zaporizhia and the breakaway Donbass republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. And the document signed by Putin, it said that Russia's new borders in the region will be determined by what borders existed on the day of their formation and admission into the Russian Federation. And Putin's signing of these documents, it came as Ukraine continued to make gains in its southern Kherson offensive. Over the past few days, Russian forces have retreated from areas in that region, and also in some eastern regions as well, as Ukraine is still pushing these counteroffensives, and they're gaining territory. And if you're watching on the video here, I put in a map, and you can see where these circles are. Those are some areas where Ukraine has been making some gains, and I mean, all this right here, they've pushed back a lot of Russian forces in this region. So when asked about this, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, he was asked, isn't this kind of a contradiction that Putin's signing these documents while losing these territories? And Peskov said, quote, "There is no contradiction here. They will be Russia forever. They will be retaken," end quote. So he's saying that this territory that has been taken by Ukraine is going to be retaken again by Russia. And this all comes as Russia is sending reinforcements into Ukraine after Putin ordered the mobilization of 300,000 Russian troops. But it still hasn't formally changed the label of its war in Ukraine from a special military operation to a full-scale war or counterterrorism operation. It could upgrade it to counterterrorism operation. That's something, again, Peskov was asked about, and he said so far no decision has been made. But Russia is definitely preparing for something, sending in these reinforcements. And I think they're going to focus mostly on Donetsk, which is which they control a little more than half of that area. I think, but who that's just what I'm guessing here, judging on the comments from Russian officials. So we'll see how it goes. But they are definitely losing territory here. And this means that Russia considers these counteroffensives attacks on Russian territory. And Putin has reminded the West that Russia would use all of the weapons at its disposal to defend its territorial integrity, including nuclear weapons. They're saying that's possible. And despite this risk of escalation, the U.S. has shown no sign of backing down on its support for Ukraine. All right, the next one. The EU agrees on sanctions to impose price cap for Russian oil. So the EU ambassadors apparently agreed on Wednesday on a new round of sanctions on Russia that includes a price cap on Russian oil. The officials agreed on a draft text for the sanctions that is expected to be released on Thursday. Some countries had concerns that the attempted price cap could impact their shipping industries, including Malta, Greece, and Cyprus, and they received some exemptions, but the details right now aren't clear. But this whole idea of placing a price cap on Russian oil is being pushed by Janet Yellen, the U.S. Treasury Secretary. It's been endorsed by the G7. They say that they're going to do it. But Russia has warned that it would cut off any countries from Russian energy, not just Russian oil or Russian gas, from all Russian energy, if they try to impose caps. But that has not stopped the Western powers from pushing ahead with the plan. An EU ban on importing Russian oil and providing insurance for Russian oil shipments comes into effect in December. And the idea of the price cap is that they'll make an exemption for the insurance because the insurance is big. Russia still relies on insurance companies in Europe. and Britain to ship a lot of its oil. So the idea is that they'll still issue insurance if the oil sold at this set price, but it relies on cooperation from Russia, and Russia has said it will retaliate. They're saying this, and if Russia retaliates by slashing oil production, it could send global prices skyrocketing. And there's many experts and analysts are saying that this is going to happen if they try to impose this price cap, but they're still going ahead and doing it. I just, I mean, it just seems so stupid to me. But and it also requires the cooperation of China and India, who have become major purchasers of Russian oil after the U.S. and other Western sanctions. So, and they're already buying Russian oil at a discount, so they don't really have a reason to rock the boat to change the arrangement. So, I mean, this could just be another attempt at sanctioning Russia that's just going to backfire on the West. That's what it looks like is going to happen. But they just keep going ahead with this plan. Um, all right. Next one here. Poland says that it's discussed hosting nuclear weapons with the US. So this is Poland's President Duda. He said in an interview published Wednesday that Poland is open to hosting US nuclear weapons and has approached Washington about the idea. So NATO has a nuclear sharing program. Currently, NATO members Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey, they host US nuclear weapons under this program. And I'm not sure how it works in each country. I think there's varying degrees of what nuclear sharing means. But I know in Germany, they have a fleet of planes that are designated to drop US nuclear warheads that they have. So I guess they have the ability to drop them themselves. Germany does. Um, so he said that there's always this potential opportunity, the Polish president, to participate in this nuclear sharing program. Now, the US and NATO have previously said that they would not place nuclear weapons in countries that joined the alliance after the Cold War, but Duda said that discussions on the issue are happening. And these statements are very provocative. I mean, that's bringing nuclear weapons much closer to Russia in Poland, which was a former Warsaw Pact state. And, it just comes as, of course, I mean, I said in the article, soaring tensions between the U.S. and Russia, but I mean, it's just very obvious that that's the situation. But this whole crisis and war, it largely stems from NATO expansion east of Germany since the end of the Cold War and the alliance's promise to eventually absorb Ukraine. It made that promise in 2008 to Ukraine that it would eventually join NATO. But it still hasn't. But the door is open publicly. That's the policy. They say, yeah, you'll be able to join eventually, but not really. um, but the U.S. recently announced that it's building a permanent military base in Poland, which is breaking from an agreement known as the 1997 NATO-Russia Founding Act. So under this agreement, the U.S. and NATO agreed not to establish permanent bases east of Germany. Now, the U.S. argues that the base in Poland doesn't violate the act because troops will be deployed to the facility on a rotational basis, but it's unlikely that Russia would see it that way. All right, I just want to take a moment now to mention that it's our fundraiser again. We're looking to raise $80,000 for this one. This is money, we're totally reliant on our readers, and we need this money to just fund the website, to pay this staff, pay our contributors. That's what it goes directly toward. We don't waste any of this money. We operate on a shoestring budget. There's a few of us that do this full time. We have a lot of volunteers that help us too. But this is what it takes to run the website and to give you all this content. I mean, if I just scroll down here, you just see how much content there is. This is the news section, and I've wrote a lot of these articles today. We have all great opinion pieces. We also link to all the good stories from around the web. Our spotlight is from Caitlin Johnstone. That links to her website. And you see our blog is chock full of stuff as always. And then lower, if you look lower on the page, we have all these sections of different countries. And these are just news stories from around the web. And this is just a good resource for, writers and researchers that check our site, because they can find stories about places just all over the world. But we need your help to keep this going. You can go to antiwar.com/donate to see the ways that you can support us, cryptocurrency, and we take things like that. And we still have this letter from Noam Chomsky up at the top of the page. You could click on that to read it, and it's really great. I mean, he you could tell he really actually reads antiwar.com. It's pretty amazing to me. So yeah, go support us. But back to the news here. The next one, the U.S. aims to turn Taiwan into a arms depot. So this is according to another report from the New York Times. They said that the U.S. is stepping up its efforts to turn Taiwan into a major arms depot. So U.S. officials have long called for turning Taiwan into a porcupine that could withstand a Chinese attack. But support for Taiwan has intensified in recent years as Washington has grown more confrontational toward Beijing. The U.S. wants Taiwan to focus its arm purchases on smaller, more mobile weapons as opposed to larger systems, similar to what the U.S. has been shipping to Ukraine. The Times report said that the U.S. has been conveying this message to Taiwanese officials and to the U.S. arms industry. The Biden administration recently approved a $1.1 billion arms sale for Taiwan that includes 60 Harpoon anti-ship missiles. Senate leaders are working to push forward a piece of legislation that would give Taiwan 6.5 billion in military aid, known as the Taiwan Policy Act, which includes other unprecedented support for Taiwan. So the policy of arming Ukraine and Taiwan is just a total boon for the arms industry as the US and its NATO allies are taking steps to ramp up weapons production. The 6.5 billion for Taiwan that's included in the Taiwan Policy Act, that would be in the form of foreign military financing. And that is a State Department program that gives foreign governments money to buy U.S. weapons. That's how the U.S. gives Israel most of its aid each year. The 3.8 billion that Israel gets each year, 3.3 billion is foreign military financing. Taiwan has been under increasing Chinese military pressure because Nancy Pelosi decided to go there in August, and her visit sparked China's largest ever military drill around the island, which included the simulation of a blockade. So the exercises led to U.S. officials. It led U.S. officials to conclude that China would likely opt for a blockade rather than an invasion of Taiwan if it chooses to take military action against the island. But increased U.S. support for Taiwan will just escalate tensions in the region and make Chinese military action more likely. That's pretty clear from the way China is responding to all this stuff. That if the U.S., they're going to increase this support for Taiwan in the name of deterrence, but it's actually just going to make a conflict more likely. All right, the next one, the U.S. has scaled back its surveillance flights in the South China Sea, which is good. This is from the South China Morning Post, and they have a lot of good articles that they track the number of U.S. planes and stuff that are flying around the South China Sea. This is according to a Beijing-based think tank, the South China Sea Probing Initiative. It said monthly records from this think tank show that land-based U.S. reconnaissance aircraft made 28 sorties during September, down from 46 in August. So some months, that's been up to 60, pretty high. And so, yeah, back in July, there were 67 of these flights. So then down to 46 in August and down to 28 in September. So that's a good trend, a downward trend. We really saw this stuff spike under Trump his last couple years. This military activity really shot up. And then when Biden came in, it really shot up again. But then it seemed like it went down a little and back up. But now it's going down, at least for now. So that's good. But again, they're taking all these steps to increase support for Taiwan, which is really more provocative to China than these flights. Okay, so the next one, the U.S. accuses OPEC of aligning with Russia. Gulf state denies politics at play. So ministers from a group of oil exporting countries, OPEC Plus, led by Saudi Arabia and Russia, they agreed on Wednesday to slash output by 2 million barrels a day, prompting pushback from the U.S. So this is where's the quote here? Because it's really amazing. So this is the White House press secretary, um, Karine Jean-Pierre. She said, "It's clear that OPEC Plus is aligning with Russia with today's announcement." So, I mean, it's just such a short-sighted thing to say. I mean, um, to accuse them of something like this, the other OPEC countries, when you want them to increase production and just go ahead and accuse them of being aligned with Russia, doesn't seem like a smart policy. That article is from Middle East Eye, by the way. Um, and the next one, this is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute and Connor Freeman. And it's interesting. There was a new poll that shows nearly 70% of Americans want to end arms sales to Saudi Arabia, and only a slight majority support selling arms to Israel. So this was the Eurasia Group. I'm not sure if I guess it was their survey. But that's just a good sign. I mean, I think it's been pretty clear over the past few years that public opinion in the U.S. towards Saudi Arabia has really turned. The Khashoggi killing played a big role in that. Um, but according to this survey, only 52% of Americans want to keep giving Israel military aid. I mean, that's the majority, but still, I mean, only 52%. That seems pretty significant. So hopefully this poll is an accurate representation of what people are thinking. The next one here, President Biden has been urged to press the Saudi coalition to end the Yemen blockade. This is another one from Middle East Eye. A group of 38 members of U.S. Congress, I believe from the House, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, Mark Pocan, they sent a letter to the Biden administration as this ceasefire has expired in Yemen, telling them to press Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf coalition members like the UAE to lift the blockade on Yemen. So 38 members of the House, it's not a too high of a number, but it's significant that they're saying, press Saudi Arabia to lift this blockade, because that's really the best thing. That's what needs to happen for them to do it, is that they need Biden to push them. And that's why comments like accusing them of being aligned with Russia uh, just are not good for diplomacy. But the U.S. has a lot of leverage over Saudi Arabia in this war because they maintain their air force. They wouldn't be able to launch it if not for the U.S. So they could get this to happen. And it was interesting. There's the blockade. I mean, the worst. Most people that have died in Yemen. 377,000 are estimated to have been killed in the war since the U.S.-backed coalition intervened in 2015. That's according to the UN as of the end of 2021. So the number could be much higher, and it's considered to be a pretty low estimate. But more than half of those people died due to starvation and disease conditions caused by the war. And the reason why there's such horrible conditions is because of the blockade and because the Saudis bombed civilian infrastructure just all the time. And since during the ceasefire, the blockade was eased, but it wasn't fully lifted. So these members of Congress are telling Biden, get it fully lifted, which I think is great because that's what needs to happen. And the Houthis have always said if they want real peace talks, a real political settlement, they have to lift that blockade. And also, this article mentions that there's war powers resolution from in the House and the Senate, over 100 bipartisan co-sponsors. You can call 1-833 Stop War to tell your representative to support it. Hopefully, they have a vote soon. I'm hoping the ceasefire expiring is going to make that happen. Finally, put this thing on the floor for a vote. So to get it going, still no sign yet of Saudi airstrikes since the ceasefire expired. So that's good because that would just be, hopefully that doesn't happen. All right, the next one, another one from Kyle and Will Porter at the Libertarian Institute. North Korea launches missiles toward Japan for the second time this week. So Pyongyang test fired 2 short-range missiles that flew in the direction of Japan on Thursday after a similar launch earlier this week reached Japanese airspace and prompted a show of force from Washington and Seoul in response. So this is just another example. It's becoming tit for tat. The U.S. and South Korea have begun to do these war games again. And the missile tests from North Korea are just a regular thing now after years of them not happening. So I wonder if we're going to maybe see a different approach from the Biden administration to this situation, or if they're just going to keep, the pressure on and just tit for tat like this. Okay, so the last one here. This is good news if it happens. It's just a report from the Wall Street Journal said that the U.S. is looking to ease sanctions on Venezuela to allow Chevron to pump oil. This is more the Biden administration worried about getting oil out on the market. So I wonder, that's why I just don't understand the price cap, the Russian price cap. Like, why do they continue to pursue that? Um, but this report said that the Biden administration is preparing to ease sanctions on Venezuela under a potential deal with the Venezuelan government. So, just a little background: the Trump administration began imposing crippling economic sanctions on Venezuela in 2017. In 2019, the U.S. recognized Juan Guaido as the interim president and backed a failed coup attempt against Maduro, the president of Venezuela, that the U.S. doesn't recognize. The sanctions, as always, they have done little to hurt the government, but have had a devastating impact on the civilian population and the country's economy, which is uh, the purpose of sanctions. They can't pretend like it doesn't hurt ordinary people at this point when there's countless examples of it doing so. But under the potential deal, the U.S. would give Venezuela significant sanctions relief, and Maduro's government would resume talks with the opposition on the 2024 presidential election. Guaido has virtually no support left in Venezuela after his failed coup attempt and repeated calls for foreign intervention. But there are other opposition figures that I guess Maduro could talk to, that the U.S. wants him to talk to. Uh, so the deal could also unlock hundreds of millions in frozen Venezuelan government funds held by U.S. banks that would be used to pay for imports of food, medicine, and equipment needed to repair the country's power and water infrastructure. The report said that the terms of the deal are expected to be shored up later this month. Responding to the report, the National Security Council said that there were no plans to change sanctions policy without constructive steps from the Maduro government. So, this spokesperson for the National Security Council said that U.S. policy remains unchanged and that they will continue to implement and enforce these sanctions. So, we'll see if something happens here. I mean, I'm not really sure how far Maduro would go to please the U.S. Or what they would find acceptable. But what was interesting, this report said that Wall Street firms and investors have been pressing the Biden administration to lift sanctions on Venezuela to open up business opportunities in the country. And the country sits atop the world's largest oil reserves, and getting more Venezuelan crude on the market could significantly ease global prices. Okay, so that is it for the news. We have a lot of good viewpoints, as always. And just to mention, go to handsoffassange.com to find Assange rallies near you. I'm going to be at the one in Washington, D.C. this Saturday, along with a lot of other people that are going to be speaking. It's a packed lineup. So go check that out and support Julian Assange. I saw Stella Assange, his wife, was on TV in England, Piers Morgan show with John Bolton, and they went back and forth, and she really just made him look like just a fool to be on there. Basically said he should be tried for war crimes, and that he could be convicted for, if he were to ever see an international court. But it was really great. If you want to find that, I retweeted it if you want to look at my Twitter. But that's it for me for today. I'll be back tomorrow with some more news. If you're listening to the audio version, just go subscribe to the YouTube channel just so I get those numbers up. But Odyssey too, if people want alternatives to YouTube. But that's it for me for today. I'll be back tomorrow with some more news. Thank you.